we've been going through that until now, so should be. Bon, mesdames et messieurs, part of, je sais pas, who speaks French, who's English, who's, well, okay. I think English, I don't know, as you wish. Well, you can speak and listen, both in French and English. There are headsets. There's a translation. So we're going to start in English. So we're here on a session on housing. We're going to have two panels on these sessions. One with questions addressed to the governments, and the second on the solutions that can be delivered by some actors. But first, we have the immense pleasure and the honor of hosting here the acting executive director of UN Habitat, Mr. Michel Mlinard, and we are very happy to have him to introduce and to deliver us a keynote for this session. So please, Michel Mlinard, if you can step to the...
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and thank you to France, to UNEP, and to the Global Alliance on Buildings and Constructions for facilitating this very important forum. Honorable ministers, guests, partners, dear colleagues, it is indeed a pleasure and an honor for me to start this important discussion on housing, which is an absolutely crucial component of the discussion that having in the forum over these 2 days, that really we can focus our attention as part of the wider building and climate discussion on housing. I know many of you are from the housing urbanization ministries. Many of you work on these issues. So I think this is a community that sticks together and that, of course, has a lot to say. So I look forward very much to engaging with the two panels that we will be having a bit later. For us at UN Habitat, we indeed strongly believe that the way we design, construct, and operate housing not only influences urban and economic growth, but also shapes the daily lives of people, impacting their health, security, and overall well-being. And this, I think, needs to remain at the core and at the center of our attention when we are discussing these issues, because it is about the people that we serve and about the people that need to be at the center of the solutions that we are looking for. Quality and sustainable housing are critical in our efforts to combat climate change and reduce pollution, safeguard both present and future generations. As I said earlier in the breakfast meeting that we had this morning, future is not a distant category. The future, in fact, starts today. So we are really obliged to look into the future starting from now. This need for action is not limited to any one region. It is indeed a global imperative for both for the fast-growing regions of Africa and Southeast Asia, as well as many urbanized regions. So again, this is not a north versus south type of discussion that we are having, but indeed it's very global. By which I'm not saying that one size fits all or that any solutions need to be imposed on anybody, but the conversations that we are having really need to focus on this as a global issue, and of course we need to look for global solutions that are fit for different contexts. As we set the scene for the discussion, I don't need to remind you that the building and constructions sector is responsible for a large share of global greenhouse gas emissions and consumed resources. We are not on track to achieve decarbonization by 2050, and unfortunately, we have to say that the gap is widening. Today, 2.8 billion people experience some form of housing inadequacy, ranging from homelessness, substandard and unsafe housing, and energy poverty. UN Habitat forecasts this number will increase without a strong paradigm shift that puts people at the center again. There is a need for innovative and inclusive solutions that can meet the diverse and changing needs of the people while ensuring the environmental, social, cultural, and economic sustainability of the housing sector. This lays the foundation of the work that UN Habitat is carrying out to implement the UN Habitat Assembly resolution on adequate housing for all. And by the way, we are proud to say that France has been one of the key champions of the adequate housing for all resolution during the Habitat Assembly. The resolution, which in fact in the end was supported by a large and diverse number of member states, calls upon national, local and regional authorities to expand access to safe, sustainable, adequate and affordable housing for all, especially for those facing the greatest global challenges in the housing context. And in fact, based on this resolution, for the first time in October, we will be convening a new intergovernmental working group on housing, which is a new vehicle, a new platform that we have at our disposal to discuss these same issues. So I hope that as many of you as possible will be able to join us in Nairobi in October for the first meeting of this intergovernmental working group on housing. Addressing housing needs sustainably requires transformative approaches. We are supporting stakeholders globally to revise urban settlements patterns, increase densification and mixed-use neighborhoods, enhance design and construction capacity, and the use of locally produced and regenerative materials. Crucially, we must develop and mainstream solutions that cater to the needs of people without exacerbating climate change, resource scarcity, and biodiversity loss. Circular approaches offer a promising avenue, not only reducing environmental impacts, but also fostering social and economic benefits, including the creation of local enterprises and jobs. Here, I indeed cannot overemphasize the importance of local solutions and involvement of local actors for us to be successful in this endeavor. At the intersection of housing and climate change lies another significant challenge. As we navigate the path towards a more sustainable sector, it is imperative to anchor climate mitigation and adaptation efforts within a robust human rights framework. This ensures that our actions do not exacerbate inequalities and loss of housing through displacement, land grabbing, increases in rent, unnecessary clearing of informal areas, and lack of participation of the affected communities. Again, community-driven approach is crucial, and we need to see housing as a human right, not as a privilege of any kind, because really, when you imagine a mother bringing her newborn child home, then of course this is the beginning, and there needs to be a concept of home, an appropriate and adequate home, which of course is associated with housing. Our approach to address these critical challenges focuses on supporting governments to establish comprehensive national strategies for climate neutral, inclusive and affordable housing, securing commitment from all stakeholders, outlining legislative, regulatory, and investment actions. One of these actions is the formation of country roadmaps for decarbonizing the building and construction sector through sustainable building materials within the global ABC framework and in close partnership with our sister agency, with UNEP and UNOPS through the funding that we have received from BMZ, from the German Ministry, Federal Ministry for International Cooperation and Development. Currently, Bangladesh, Ghana, and Senegal, just as an example, are in the process of developing national roadmaps, with Burkina Faso, for example, and Sri Lanka having led the piloting phase. These have proven critical to highlight policy gaps and opportunities and to mobilize stakeholders through a shared vision. We would also like to encourage stakeholders to align policies, regulations, and investments with sustainability goals, use locally available, traditional, and recycled materials, tailor designs to local needs, prioritize passive design solutions, as well as assess natural capital, plan on long-term horizon, and specialize growth projections, prioritizing compact communities with accessible resources and services. In conclusion, honorable ministers, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, let me stress that we might not have a second chance to get things right. Still, while the challenges and opportunities within the buildings and construction sector are profound and urgent, the right strategies, partnerships, and commitments can transform this sector into really a driving force for sustainable urban development, environmental stewardship, and equitable access to housing. And for us, from this particular perspective, this is the crucial importance of the forum that we are attending these 2 days. And again, I would like to congratulate France in particular and the other two co-organizers for this truly transformative initiative that we believe will take us a long way in really being able to find good policy solutions that will make a huge difference for the people that need the results on the ground. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Well, I think we can all thank the acting executive director of UN Habitat for these inspiring talks. Of course, this question of housing, that's why I said that. We have several tracks. We have buildings, we have cities, we have housing. In some way, I don't know why these tracks don't fit together. I mean, sometimes like people say we need houses, and you say you need sustainable houses, and they say we need housing first, we need sustainable buildings first, and then doesn't. So the purpose of this session is very much this one. It's that at the end of the day, it's the same thing, because if you're not exactly as you said, if you're not building houses the right way, you should build it in the first place. You are only building buildings and houses that are ready to renovate in some way. You're building ready to renovate houses. So anyway, I will pursue here with our honorable ministers and local authorities representatives. So please, Mr. Jadel Filho, I'm sorry. I need to call him. Ministry of Cities of Brazil, please step up. Honorable Mr. Charles Milupi from Zambia, Minister of Infrastructure, Housing and Urban Development, and Mr. Jeffrey Little, General Deputy Assistant Secretary for Housing at the Office of Housing of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Department, USA, and Ronan Dantec from Climate Change, Senator and President of Climate Change. So in this order, please take your seats. It's really an honor to have you all here because you represent really first different situations, different conditions, and important questions. So I want to ask you maybe, Mr. Jader Filho, first, what is your key points of your housing policy? And this is the same question I'm going to address to all of you. How does your housing policy take into account the necessary mitigation and adaptation that we are facing? And how do you articulate in some way the necessity of these two questions of sustainability and social needs? So please, Mr. Jader Filho, you go first.
I will speak in Portuguese, and we have a translation, so please use the... Thank you. Primeiro, eu quero agradecer, em nome do senhor Lohan, toda essa hospitalidade que nos foi dada aqui, que sempre é usual dos franceses, então muito obrigado. Parabéns pela organização excepcional de um tema tão importante que a gente deve discutir sempre, como esse que a gente vai fazer agora aqui. Primeiro, quero iniciar a apresentação. Por favor, passa isso. Nós temos um grande programa, que é um dos principais programas do governo do presidente Lula, desde o primeiro mandato dele, em 2009, na verdade, do segundo mandato dele, em 2009, que nós temos o programa que chama Minha Casa, Minha Vida. Esse programa já entregou a moradias sociais cerca de 8 milhões de habitações desde 2009. Nós ficamos nos últimos 4 anos do governo anterior sem construir nenhuma única casa de interesse social, mas agora nós estamos retomando essas construções. A meta é que nós façamos em 4 anos, nós fazemos a contratação de mais de 2 milhões de unidades habitacionais nos próximos 4 anos. Todas elas com faixas de renda que vão de 0 até 8 mil reais, que vai dar alguma coisa em torno de, em dólares, são 5.500 dólares mais ou menos, tá? Essa é a renda das famílias. Esses números aqui que estão divididos mais ou menos entre os financiamentos que nós propomos entre as famílias e aquelas casas que são subsidiadas. Essa aqui é a realidade hoje de parte das pessoas que moram no Brasil. Nós estamos querendo que elas mudem dessa realidade que está aqui para aquela realidade. Aquilo são os condomínios do Minha Casa Minha Vida que são entregues para as famílias do nosso país. Então, são essas duas realidades que nós queremos. Nós queremos acabar com essa realidade daqui e viver naquela realidade ali para todos. O nosso déficit habitacional no Brasil hoje gira em torno de 6 milhões de unidades habitacionais. Nós queremos diminuir em 1/3, nesses 4 anos, nós queremos diminuir em 1/3 esse déficit habitacional. Nós fizemos algumas alterações importantes, Lohan, no programa Minha Casa Minha Vida, é um novo programa que foi estabelecido. Nós estamos valorizando os terrenos para a construção dessas novas unidades habitacionais, estejam perto das escolas, perto das creches, perto dos postos de saúde, perto do emprego, do comércio, para que as pessoas se sintam, de fato, inseridas dentro da cidade. Não pode mais ser fora. Alguns condomínios, nos programas anteriores, eram construídos fora das cidades. Agora tem que ser dentro do centro urbano, o mais próximo possível do emprego e da vida onde as pessoas vivem. Nós não queremos mais deslocar as pessoas de onde elas estavam. Queremos que elas permaneçam onde elas estão. Outra questão da escolha, que aí, respondendo a sua pergunta, Lohan, a escolha dos materiais para que sejam materiais cada vez menos agressivos e compatíveis com essa nova realidade que o planeta está vivendo, fora a questão da energia renovável. Todos esses novos contratos serão feitos, a energia que vai abastecer esses condomínios todos serão feitos com energia solar, a partir de aquisição de fazendas solares que vão abastecer. Então, nós temos 2 ganhos com isso. As famílias não precisam pagar as contas de energia, porque a energia já vai estar paga com aquela energia solar que o próprio governo já estará construindo e contratando. E também um impacto, obviamente, ambiental, que nós vamos estar fazendo uma contribuição importante ambientalmente falando, que é o principal tema que nós estamos discutindo todos esses dias aqui em Paris. Nós temos aqui a questão, nós temos feito um inventário dentro do programa Minha Casa Minha Vida da emissão de carbono. Também temos feito dentro das especificações dessas construções a questão da gestão dos resíduos que são emitidos por essas construções, para que a gente diminua o impacto e aí trabalhando com a questão da descarbonização na nossa nesse programa do Minha Casa Minha Vida. Tem também a questão da gestão de saneamento. Todos esses condomínios já vêm com todo o saneamento, água, esgotamento sanitário, todos eles. Isso é uma exigência do programa, independentemente de em que região esteja, aquele condomínio tem que estar ambientalmente adequado na questão do saneamento. E, por último, que é a questão do ciclo de vida do programa, desses condomínios, que nós estamos usando materiais que sejam materiais mais duráveis, para que esses condomínios não precisem ficar, obviamente, tendo gastos e fazendo emissão de carbonos. Nós temos também o nosso programa brasileiro de qualidade e produtividade do habitat, e que está justamente acompanhando todas essas construções, tem que estar adequadas a isso. E o nosso programa, que nós chamamos de PBQPH, eles estão exatamente sintonizados com isso que está sendo discutido aqui nesses dias. Então, as nossas leis já estão amparadas nisso. Obviamente, nós estamos vindo aqui para poder fazer atualizações a partir dessas discussões, mas a nossa intenção é que a gente possa avançar ainda mais na questão da descarbonização dessas construções. Fora isso, nós temos a questão da melhoria habitacional, que também é uma das soluções para o Brasil, porque muitas das vezes você não precisa retirar aquelas famílias de onde elas estão morando, muito pelo contrário, aquilo acaba sendo uma solução para aquelas famílias. O que a gente precisa, na verdade, é melhorar o lar daquelas famílias, é você dar uma qualidade de vida para onde elas já moram, porque o transtorno de você transferir uma família de um lugar para o outro é muito grande. Então, se você puder preservar ela ali onde ela está, talvez a solução seja até melhor do que você dar uma nova casa para essas famílias. E, em cima disso, nós estamos trabalhando com juros acessíveis. Esse é o menor juros da história do programa habitacional no Brasil. 4% ao ano na região norte e nordeste, 4,25% ao ano nas regiões centro-oeste, sudeste e sul. Com isso, facilitando e trazendo mais famílias para que elas possam acessar o financiamento. Fora isso, nós ampliamos o valor do subsídio para que na entrada da compra do imóvel, do financiamento do imóvel, as famílias não tenham que pagar nada na entrada, e com isso elas paguem a parcela, porque elas têm o dinheiro da parcela. Pelo contrário, a parcela é até menor do que elas já pagam de aluguel. Na verdade, elas não conseguem dar a entrada daquele financiamento. Então, com isso, a gente consegue trazer famílias de baixíssima renda para dentro do programa Minha Casa Minha Vida. Fora a assistência técnica, que é feita pelos técnicos da Caixa Econômica Federal, que é a nossa parceira nesse investimento, para fazer o acompanhamento dessas obras de melhoria habitacional. A parceria entre os público e privado, nós estamos discutindo, independentemente da coloração partidária, do lado partidário, nós estamos trabalhando os estados e municípios todos conjuntamente para que a política habitacional seja uma política única, onde a gente facilita e traz mais gente para dentro desses programas habitacionais. Por último, um acompanhamento mais ágil para que a gente possa fazer com que as empresas também estejam mais saudáveis no processo de pagamento desses condomínios. Por último, a promoção da locação social, onde a gente traz as famílias dos moradores de rua para dentro do programa, com isso fazendo um processo de transição deles, seja da transição social ou da transição de saúde, para que a gente possa, ao final, entregar uma casa do Minha Casa Minha Vida para essas famílias. E a questão do retrofit, que é um processo que nós estamos investindo fortemente para que a gente possa requalificar o centro das nossas cidades. Muito obrigado mais uma vez, Laurent, pela recepção dos franceses, e convidem-nos mais aqui a Via Paris, essa cidade que brilha aos olhos de todos nós. Muito obrigado.
Sans doute. On sera très heureux de vous accueillir à nouveau. On sera très heureux aussi d'aller au Brésil pour la COP 30 et peut-être avant.
Yes,
pour
and
d'autres-
I
pour d'autres
invite you
occasions.
to my city, Belém, in 2025 to COP30. I invite all of you to see the beautiful city in the Amazon region. Please come to our
Merci.
city.
Merci. Je note, donc merci beaucoup. Avant de passer la parole au ministre de la Zambie, je voudrais juste noter que dans la salle, Ligia Noronia, nous fait le plaisir d'être ici, et que c'est un témoin, je pense aussi, du rapprochement sur cette question entre le programme des Nations Unies pour l'environnement et ONU Habitat. Je le prends comme un bon signe. Donc je continue en français, parce que chacun a mis ses petits appareils. Donc on va continuer à parler en français. Donc monsieur le ministre, la Zambie. Monsieur le ministre, qu'en est-il de la situation? OK. C'est compliqué? Okay, so I'm going to continue in English. Okay. So what's anyway? That's it's so not easy to speak French. Okay. So what should I do? So okay. Well, anyway, English. So, Mr. Minister, how is it in Zambia? I'm not asking you exactly the same question, so I'm not going to repeat myself and save time, in the interest of time. Can you tell us what's the situation in Zambia and how your policy is taking into account this question about adaptation and mitigation? It's on, I think.
Hello. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. First of all, Zambia, I would like to thank the organizers of this conference for inviting us and for enabling us to be part of this important process. Now, with regard to Zambia, the first of all is to establish where we are in terms of provision of housing. As a country, we have a housing deficit of about 2 million housing units at the moment. And please understand that our total population is about 20 million. So that deficit is quite significant. And we think that within 6-8 years, this will rise to about just over 3 million units. Now, what are the issues that we are confronting in terms of addressing this particular problem? First of all, I think some of the issues that have been highlighted in this conference, the issues of finance, availability of finance. But in our case, it is finance at the right cost. Being a third world country, we find that the global financing architecture is really skewed against third world countries. We have access to international finance, but usually it's very expensive. The rating agencies really work against third world countries. So that is one of the things that we are addressing globally. The second issue is land, and not just land, but also land tenure. This is an issue that we can address because we have access to land. And then the other issues in terms of our country is the bureaucracy that is associated with the granting of this land, the titling of this land. And then the last issue that we confront is that of the cost of raw materials required to address this particular issue. And what we are doing in that particular instance is, first of all, government supplies the land, and also through various interventions, we attempt to reduce the cost of materials by removing things like taxation on them, because we believe that it is important that we address the issue of housing. In fact, as we speak, we have engaged a private entity where within Zambia, we are going to establish a factory within this year that constructs panels. These are reinforced panels, which will mean that we are able to reduce drastically the cost of constructing this housing, the social housing, and also reduce drastically the time of putting up these houses. Two-bedroom house will take about, certainly in less than a week, we'll be able to do that. So we have had to spend a lot of time to engage with the private sector. So in terms of what are we doing, I think the guiding principle is that the housing has to be affordable, it has to be sustainable, and of course, has got to be climate resilient. We have suffered, I think yesterday, one of the panel members referred to our city, Lusaka, and the fact that it has been afflicted by cholera. This is caused by informal settlements, which are usually around the cities. And because they're informal, they come up in such a way that the provision of services, even drainages, they're very difficult to put in place. The provision of water is difficult to put in place. So we are addressing these issues. But unfortunately, unlike our colleagues from Brazil, we will have to move people, because where you have an informal settlement, and if you have to create space for drainage, for roads, for water provision, you have to create space. But we are not going to make people lose out, because we also accept that housing is a human right. So where there will be need to move people, we have to provide not only adequate land, but also provide alternative the housing for these people to move in, so that we can create space, so that we are able to make living in some of these informal settlements a lot more human. In terms of what are we doing in terms of climate resilience, we have a number of policies in Zambia. The first one is climate change policy. This is one of our national policies, which addresses all that requires to be done, including decarbonization. And we have also developed national housing policy, as well as national infrastructure policy. And all these are incorporated within our major developmental plan, which in our case is the 8th National Development Plan. We do have rolling plans, 5-year plans, and right now our country is on the 8th National Development Plan. And these are in line with Sustainable Development Goals, they're in line with the Paris Agreement and the other international goals. So I think I'll stop here for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. I think guess the situation you're facing is significant of several countries. It's thank you for delivering this very clear message in terms of finance, in terms of land, in terms of bureaucracy, in terms of difficult access to the private sector. So I would turn to you about US. I'm asking maybe you to be as straight to the point as possible, because we want to keep time for question and answers at the end. Thank you.
I'll do my best.
Yeah, thank you, Jeffrey.
And I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this panel. I come from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, where for a long time our core mission has been to deliver decent, safe, and affordable housing for all Americans. And we fully understand now that decent and safe housing has to also be sustainable and resilient in order to be decent and safe. So we're grappling with these questions of how to achieve these things at the same time every day at HUD. So I'm really pleased that the United States is a part of the commitment to the affordable housing for all, and as well as the Buildings Breakthrough. As part of our efforts on the buildings breakthrough, to make sure that resilient new construction and retrofits are zero emissions or near zero emissions by 2030, or common practice by 2030, I have a few things I want to share. We understand that cutting building sector emissions is key to addressing the climate crisis in the United States. About 30% of our greenhouse gas emissions are from operating buildings, much of it housing. 13% of our greenhouse gas emissions overall are from direct burning of fossil fuels within buildings. And an additional 7% or so of our greenhouse gas emissions come from construction materials and refrigerant. We're taking really big actions in the housing sector right now, and because we're committed that out of all of our climate investments at the federal level, at least 40% of the benefits need to go to disadvantaged communities. A lot of that action is being taken in the affordable housing space, which is the core business for HUD. The Inflation Reduction Act and bipartisan infrastructure law, which are the largest investments in climate in the United States history, is providing many billions of dollars to cut emissions and energy costs in buildings, a lot of it in housing, as well as creating jobs, advancing equity, and helping us to transition our energy economy to a clean energy economy. And that includes the program that's nearest to my heart, because I'm working on it, the Green and Resilient and Retrofit Program, which has $1 billion to support both grants and loans targeted for existing affordable housing to make major improvements to energy efficiency. It's the first program we've done that explicitly focuses on resilience as well as energy efficiency in multifamily housing. We're working to make sure that that $1 billion investment is not just a one-off, but in fact will set the stage for further decarbonization and resilience in affordable housing going forward. And to do that, we're designing the program to work smoothly with other available financing resources in the United States. We're creating a resiliency assessment tool, which is really key. We're trying to make sure that property owners have a clearer picture of how to assess their resiliency, and that resiliency tool will be available broadly to anyone who wants to use it. We're also providing free energy benchmarking to all affordable housing in the United States. We know that owners take action on their own to address energy needs once they can see the data and understand how they compare to other properties. And we're encouraging in the program innovative retrofit techniques and products to help shift markets and create more of a capacity building in the United States for these types of retrofits in housing. I also want to mention disaster recovery a little bit. We had $28 billion plus disasters events in the United States last year, with a couple million households displaced by those disasters. And so increasingly a lot of the work that our agency is doing is involving recovering from those disasters. So we've provided over $100 billion in disaster recovery funds in recent years, and we are working to make sure that those investments go to resilient improvements in properties and rebuilding in a resilient way as well as an energy efficient way. And then one last thing I'll mention is we have a program called the Affordable Home Energy Shot program at the Department of Energy, which is more targeted at homeowners, but is designed to reduce the cost of decarbonization for homeowners by 50% within a decade. And so there's more information on that.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, this panel is incredible because we have three very different situations. And obviously we're talking about housing as something in general. And you can see how it's linked. But there's something I see that is on the underground of all this. It's financing in some way. And so we're gonna go through that on the second part of the panel. Well, let's wait for this moment. Ronan Dantec is the president of Climate Change Association. Climate Change had a meeting on housing in Africa in Yaoundé last year. So I want him to give us a little hint about what happened at this moment in Yaoundé about housing in Africa specifically, and the role of local authorities as Climate Change is an association, a non-profit of non-governmental stakeholders, and specifically local authorities. So please, Ronan, go ahead.
Thank you, Yves-Laurent. I do my best to be very short. And I speak in English, you have translation. And I speak in French, because you have translation. La feuille de route de Yaoundé qui a été adoptée à Yaoundé, travaillée avant et pendant le sommet de Yaoundé, qui a réuni près d'un millier d'acteurs africains sur ces questions de logement durable, a été depuis soutenu par tous les grands réseaux de collectivités locales africaines, en premier lieu CGLU Afrique, de grands réseaux d'ONG, des réseaux économiques et d'entreprises. Donc on peut considérer que cette feuille de route, signée par un nombre important d'acteurs, est aujourd'hui représentative de ce que pensent les acteurs non étatiques, non gouvernementaux africains des urgences en termes de développement de l'habitat. Et Climate Change, en tant qu'ONG internationale, a pour rôle de faire émerger cette parole commune, mais c'est bien la parole commune des acteurs africains. Et d'ailleurs, ici, durant cette excellente initiative et ce grand sommet, c'est surtout les élus camerounais, mais qui sont dans d'autres sessions en même temps, qui l'ont présenté et porté. Donc je vais en résumer quelques points, et ça ouvrira aussi le débat, pour dire tout d'abord, mais Yves Laurent l'a un tout petit peu déjà dit, qui est que sans le renforcement des capacités techniques et financières des autorités locales, des gouvernements locaux, nous ne pourrons pas tenir les enjeux sur l'habitat et sur le logement. Ça se joue évidemment à cette échelle, et on sait qu'on bute aussi sur la faiblesse de capacité d'action aujourd'hui des autorités locales africaines. Donc quand on parle logement, on doit évidemment en même temps parler décentralisation, à la fois en termes de capacité juridique et de capacité financière. Ensuite, le point qui est clé dans cette déclaration, alors vous trouvez la déclaration complète en français et en anglais sur le site de Climate Change, c'est de dire qu'il y a un enjeu majeur sur la planification urbaine et la maîtrise foncière. Et ça recoupe aussi un autre sujet que je trouve personnellement encore trop peu présent dans le débat sur ce thème entre l'habitat durable et le climat, qui est l'enjeu d'adaptation au changement climatique, non pas simplement la réduction des émissions, mais bien l'adaptation aux effets du changement climatique. Et on voit bien dans beaucoup de villes africaines aujourd'hui, à quel point, par exemple, sur les risques d'inondation, s'il n'y a pas de planification et de maîtrise foncière, on va vers de grandes catastrophes. Donc on a cet enjeu majeur de planification, de maîtrise foncière, ce qui veut dire là aussi des capacités à faire respecter cette planification, à avoir une capacité d'achat. Ça fait écho à l'intervention aussi du ministre africain, pour ne pas subir, c'est plus facile à dire qu'à faire, j'en suis évidemment conscient comme nous tous ici, ne pas subir un développement non contrôlé des grandes villes africaines. Ce qui veut dire aussi, et ça CGLU Afrique le porte toujours, qu'un des grands enjeux se joue certainement dans les villes moyennes africaines. On focalise souvent sur la question des mégalopoles, des très très grandes villes, mais aujourd'hui, une part très importante de la population africaine vit dans des villes moyennes. Si on n'accompagne pas le développement durable de ces villes moyennes, alors on va se retrouver avec des problèmes absolument ingérables dans les mégalopoles. Donc c'est vrai que dans les priorités, y compris d'action internationale, ces villes moyennes doivent être au cœur de la stratégie. Et une fois qu'on a parlé de cette planification et qu'on sait la réalité, je pense que l'intérêt de la feuille de route de Yaoundé, c'est qu'elle évoque et affronte clairement la question de l'habitat informel, qui est souvent un peu un tabou de la discussion, où on aurait toujours tendance à penser qu'il suffit peut-être de passer un coup de bulldozer et de faire émerger une ville nouvelle avec tous les grands standards pour régler les problèmes. Alors qu'en fait, aujourd'hui, l'enjeu de logement se joue d'abord sur l'accompagnement de l'amélioration de l'habitat informel progressivement, parce qu'au vu des enjeux, 200 millions de logements manquants en Afrique, c'est obligatoirement aussi par l'amélioration progressive de l'habitat informel que les choses vont se jouer. Et cette déclaration a certainement le mérite de le dire clairement, alors que souvent, cette question de l'évolution de l'habitat informel est un peu absente dans les débats. Et dernier point, et je ne serai donc pas plus long, et ça a été un petit peu évoqué, dans cette question de la relation entre l'habitat durable et le climat, il y a la question des financements. Et j'entends très bien ce qu'a dit le ministre de Zambie, par exemple, sur les taux d'intérêt, question absolument essentielle, le ministre brésilien l'a dit aussi, c'est que est-ce qu'on utilise une partie de la finance climat de manière plus innovante pour servir de garantie, pour faire baisser des taux d'intérêt, pour structurer des filières matériaux qui seraient moins chères. Je pense qu'on a vraiment une réflexion à mener. Et là, ça amène effectivement l'ensemble des agences à travailler ensemble, entre les agences qui s'occupent du climat, y compris de finance climat, comme la CNUC et ONU Habitat, pour essayer d'utiliser différemment et avec peut-être beaucoup plus d'impact cette finance climat, cette recette climat au service de structuration de l'habitat durable. Je crois que cette question, il faut vraiment qu'on la mette sur la table, qu'on la traite dans tous les moments internationaux auxquels nous pouvons participer, parce que je pense que beaucoup de choses se jouent à ce niveau-là. Donc voilà un certain nombre de points de cette déclaration de Yaoundé dont on a la prétention de penser qu'elle structure un peu différemment le débat aujourd'hui, qu'il faut évidemment encore la faire connaître et voir quel impact. Et on est très heureux d'ailleurs de participer à l'initiative Housing Matters avec ONU Habitat. Merci.
Merci, Ronan. Thank you all. I'm gonna thank this panel. I'm gonna ask you to maybe stay in the room for the question and answers afterwards, so you can get back to your seats. This very masculine panel is going to be replaced by a very feminine panel. So it's a gender parity, but it's in two times. Okay. So this is my pride to introduce here Audrey Guiral-Nepels from the French Agency of Development, l'Agence française de développement. Maybe you can change the slides. Thank you. Voilà. Okay, Audrey. One of the interests of these sessions is that Yves Laurent is not pronounceable, so Mewaib is not very much pronounceable neither, so it's okay, so please step. So, Mewaib Mohamed. And I'm not even talking about Sora. That's something else also. So please get to your seat. Yeah. And yeah. We didn't think about an order, so, well, I'm gonna, but as we've been talking a lot about finance, I think finance is one thing, but new solutions also is one thing, and and several models of several solutions. We need to probably to get to the point in terms of housing. We need to develop also innovative ways of seeing things and to benefit on the experience of some to feed the solutions of others. Anyway, l'Agence française de développement is one of the most advanced development working on housing. So, of course, as it's a French agency, I'm very proud of it. So I just want to ask Audrey, what do you have to answer? What do you have to offer to these ministers who put on the table some major questions, major problems? One of the biggest problem being the question of finance. So what can you bring to the table in this regard?
Thank you very much, Yves Laurent. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with you today and to be part of this forum, this first
Je sais
forum.
pas comment on arrête ce truc. No, I'm persecuted by my phone. I have to look at the message. I'm sorry for that. Okay. Sorry.
I want to thank the organizers of this dialogue, which is an opportunity to focus on housing. And this forum is also a great opportunity to focus on housing, not only on buildings. It's a bit different. As Yves Laurent said, the French Agency for Development is involved in the subject of housing for many years. Over the past, we were shareholders of social housing companies in French overseas territories. Housing is a part of the sustainable cities strategy because, as Mr. Dantec said, and I won't come back on the issue, he very well assessed on urban development, on intermediate city, and on the huge subject of resilience for cities. But just for you to know that for us it is necessary to accompany formal urban growth, but also to prevent and improve informal settlement and precarious area, which are often the first to face climate change and risks. To answer the question, what is our role and what can we offer? Our role as a financial institution is, of course, to develop adequate support and financial tools for public decision makers, for public authority, in order to help them to unlock the production of housing and to develop sustainable cities. But, because there is a but, our conviction is that providing funding is not the only issue. This is, of course, an issue, but not the only one. What we see is that many ideas and willingness are in the field. Many countries have made housing their political priority, but few programs have managed to secure funding. And in many contexts, because in many contexts the needs are insufficiently assessed and to provide a well-targeted offer. For instance, the rental sector is very often not taken into account of any national policies. In some contexts, public policies and regulatory frameworks are incomplete or not operational enough to allow the development of affordable housing or to allow the investment of the private sector. So I will just have 3 points and be brief. What we consider is that it is necessary to provide support to public decision makers to be able to have strong national public policies, and that the national level has a key role to play. And that's why we launched 2 years ago a dedicated facility called the Sustainable Housing Initiative. The purpose of this facility is to recognize the crucial role of public decision maker, the needs of strong public policy, and to provide them support with technical assistance, with expertise, with funding of sectoral studies to develop such policies. Because it is necessary, as we say, to monitor the need, to involve the local authority, to create a framework of trust with the private sector, and to develop a really comprehensive and long-term financial scheme where everyone has a role to play, from the bottom, from the local authority to the public and to the private sectors, and to be able to be secured for everyone. So the Sustainable Housing Initiative is a worldwide fund that aims to mobilize expertise. We are currently supporting 3 countries in East Africa with this fund, and 3 countries also in Latin America, and we aim to support more countries in order to prepare bankable housing programs. That is the first point, is our conviction of the needs to prepare projects. The second point is that we have also a range of financial tools with soft loans, with grants, with guarantee, able to support national policies and investment program. For instance, we are supporting a large program in Ecuador, Casa para Todos program. In Rwanda, where the city of Kigali tried to mix an approach on slum upgradings and buildings of new housing units to maintain people on their neighborhood and avoid eviction and residentialization. We can also support directly the local level with loans direct for cities or for housing operators. Even we can provide credit lines for Housing Finance Bank and support also NGO for self-construction. And with our subsidiary, which is Proparco, we are able to finance the private sector. And just to conclude and how we see the ways forward, because it was the topic today, we strongly believe in the importance of mobilization and partnerships on the housing subject. As said Yves Laurent at the beginning, France supported the resolution of at the General Assembly of New Habitat on adequate housing. We are very glad to have a partnership with New Habitat that will allow us to develop common communication and advocacy on the subject, but also to share data, because it is really important to share data, to diffuse studies and knowledge about housing. And the next World Urban Forum in November will be also the place to have a meeting with different stakeholders and follow this resolution and what has been done on the subject. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll have some discussions probably about the question of financing later. I want to turn to Sorcha. And I want to ask you a question. We have a rental housing sector in France that's in Europe more globally that is quite developed and offering, we think, good solutions. What do you think this kind of solutions or others could offer to the developing and emerging countries in some way? Is there something reproducible? What are your thoughts about that?
Thank you very much, Yves. I think there's a lot of potential there, and I think the time is very much right. Our Honourable Acting Executive Director of UN Habitat called for a new paradigm on housing, and this is indeed what Housing Europe is calling for also at European level. And I think the key driver for that is going to be a political one, because the latest statistics show 46% of people in private rental housing feel at risk now in the EU of losing their home. This is a major housing policy failure, but it is also a threat to all of our agendas on the housing scene, on sustainable urban development, but also on reaching our emission goals. Because if that fear is translated into bringing in unprogressive leaders in our states who are not committed to reducing emissions, then we can really worry that the emission targets will not be met. However, I think we come with a lot of good news, because this paradigm shift that was spoken about at the beginning of this session, we are starting to see this come about. Because there is a realization that the last decades of leaving housing only to the market has not worked. It is costing, even in the EU, 40 billion euro in top-ups to pay for private rents, which is a payment that has to be made continuously every year. It's not an investment in our society. However, there is an alternative, and this is the one that Yves Laurent just spoke about. And it's an evidence-based alternative that we know that works. So when you spoke about, indeed, Future Starts Today, in a way, in my daily work, representing 43,000 local, non-profit, public, municipal, cooperative, rental housing providers, which provide security of tenure and enforce tenants' rights, we are actually seeing, hopefully, the future that we will all herald with these types of initiatives. Because what we see on a daily basis with those organizations, and many of them very active in France, not only commitment to providing a safe roof over people's heads in neighborhoods where they can reach their potential, but they're also meeting their climate goals. They are committed to bringing down energy bills, but also bringing down emissions. And the French social housing sector, for instance, with the Energy Sprung example, is managing to scale up the renovation to a district level. So maintaining affordability, bringing down emissions, but also making the areas remain places where people are proud to live. So I think we have the chance to see the future that we could potentially have by multiplying those types of organizations. So I mentioned in the EU alone there are 43,000. They are renovating over 200,000 homes per year, but also delivering over 200,000 a year and investing in the economy on a limited profit basis. So what we can really, we heard the commitment to turning around the housing issue on the panel just before us, but also in Liège 2 days ago, we EU housing ministers came together in Liège and also jointly recognized the need for a new recognition of the housing crisis at European level. please note that for 13 years, housing ministers were not meeting until the French presidency reintroduced the housing ministerial meetings in Nice and 2 years ago. And we see a call for a renovation fund coming from the EU, which will support the commitment to reduce emissions in the sector. And we see also a call for a learning platform on housing, so very much in line with what my colleague Audrey was speaking about. So what is crucial is that this housing crisis that I mentioned, that is clear through people's fear of losing their home, it cannot be handled consecutively to the housing crisis. We must bring the two together. So they cannot be handled consecutively, they have to be handled simultaneously. So the moment is now to tackle both through renovation, but also through the notion of also sufficiency. So transformation of existing buildings, reaching the full potential of the use of the existing built environment so that we simultaneously deliver affordable homes and reduce the potential emissions. And I think this is very valid in the EU, but I think from speaking to many countries in fast-growing economies, this is also relevant in fast-growing economies represented here today. So this integrated approach, we have been gathering, indeed, how this can actually work when we look at renovation, but we are not focused merely on PV panels, on centimeters of insulation, but we are looking at how we can make an integrated district renovation also acceptable for those living there, so maintaining affordability, but also politically attractive. So working on bringing down health expenditure by intervening also on health improvement measures at the same time. Looking at job opportunities, working with local businesses. So what we've been doing is gathering examples around Europe, and many of these very successful ones also in France, with the transformation of areas. And looking how can we replicate this integrated approach to a fair energy transition, which we see that is possible. And finally, just the exchange. So I think there's a huge potential. Obviously, the starting points are very different, the different realities, different contexts within Europe, but globally. But I think we can demystify that success that we see in France and elsewhere, and break down the building blocks and really exchange on how we can have the right governance, the right finance, and the right organizations delivering on the ground. I think we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Sorcha. Well, Mewahib, I'm really sorry because it's either you say everything you have to say in your long paper, either we have Q&A from question and answer from the ground because we've got 10 minutes here. So please, if you can get to the point, and so that we can keep a little time. So what can the private, in your case, what can the private sector bring to this table also?
Yeah, thanks, Yves Laurent. And also it's a big challenge now to
Yeah, I'm very sorry about that. Yeah.
But yeah, I'll try just to kind of start by giving you a bit of context about REAL. So we are a UK charity working in transforming the affordable housing market in emerging markets in Africa and in Asia. And I just wanted to start quickly by giving a bit of context. So we've been repeatedly hearing about some of those key statistics and facts. So 300 million affordable new homes are required by 2030. The vast majority is in emerging markets. 70% of these buildings that will exist in Africa by 2050 are not yet built, and 90% of those will be in residential, with over 70% of people working wholly or partially in the informal economy. So I think this is just to give a context for us, because for us it's really important that we deliver scalable solutions for mass markets and genuinely affordable green homes in these emerging markets, which is a very critical thing for our mission. We know that green and resilient affordable homes deliver for people, profit, as well as a planet. And it's a largely untapped opportunity, and a growing investment opportunity as well, which is estimated at $16 trillion globally. It's also clear for us that housing is both a global necessity and a financial impact opportunity. So the question that presents itself is, why are green homes not being delivered at the scale and the need, at the scale that is needed, and what can be done about it? So this is just basically just coming to what REAL is doing to address some of those key questions and challenges. First, the appropriate finance isn't there. There is limited data and evidence to encourage and inform investments. Much of the housing need is tied to the informal economy, which is not well understood and deemed too risky. So to build that evidence-based, demonstrate proof of concept, de-risk and catalyze the market, blended financing must be harnessed and new financial technologies supported. For example, credit assessment to unlock mortgages and finance formal rental solutions for informal families, which REAL has been doing and utilizing through our Green Affordable Housing Finance instrument, which has just been launched in Kenya. My colleague now was in Kenya last week for the first launch workshop. And I'm glad that Audrey talked about this, and we are keen to see more development finance institutions deploying greater levels of genuinely blended financing to de-risk and kickstart the markets. So this is the first point I wanted to make, and how we kind of sort of looked at it through the Green Affordable Housing Finance. Second point, which is a big challenge, which is around the government need to do more on the enabling environment side. And it doesn't need to be costly, it doesn't need to cost much. And by doing so, they will stimulate the economy and deliver on climate commitments. And we know that governments in emerging markets don't have the resources to deliver the mass market solutions that I talked about earlier. So the key for this is to enable the private sector to increasingly deliver for low and middle income, complementing the government-led social housing programs. Again, referencing our Green Affordable Housing Finance instrument, REAL addresses supply and demand side barriers in parallel to kickstart green affordable housing finance ecosystem that are self-sustaining and locally driven. And then lastly, the third point, and I'll shut up after that. So there is an assumption that building green is more expensive, and we need to dispel that myth. There is plenty of evidence, including from REAL's own investment, that lower cost housing is by nature often greener. Harnessing passive designs, features, such as with wind catchers and other features. I'm an architect by training, so I was also interested more in the vernacular architecture, traditional building materials. So harnessing those, technologies and building materials to kind of address this. And what's also very important is to focus on the ongoing cost of living in that home. So again, growing evidence-based for us, strongly proving that green homes are cheaper to run and as such more affordable. And REAL, again, doing that also through our data and evidence work streams, where we provide open source data through our open access initiative, working with the Center for Affordable Housing Finance in Africa, and the market shaping indicators. So again, excellent examples that I could share more about if we have an opportunity. And I think the last point I just wanted to make quickly, referencing what Greg Monroe said yesterday, which is about collaboration, and it's key to transforming affordable housing markets. Clearly, REAL can't do that alone, and we're looking more to kind of this type of knowledge sharing and collaborations with affordable housing actors in the sector. And thank you for that, for giving us this opportunity to present and share this experience.
Obviously, there's so many things to say about that. We are just starting a discussion that hopefully we can prolong and continue within the World Urban Forum probably. and other places up. So we have a little time for questions at the end. So if there are burning questions into the audience, I would be happy to have one or two questions at the end of this session. Yes? Can you please, maybe someone can pass a microphone and... Can you please state who you are and before?
Engineer Keijuka Kenneth, my name, CEO National Housing Uganda, and we are working with AFD on solutions. But Uganda needs a special attention with respect to housing because all our housing is sprawling, homestead-based, eating up the land and the surface. But you also know that Uganda is the best country in the world with respect to how we service other countries. Uganda is the home for the wild ape, the chimpanzee, which lives in the nature that we must protect. Uganda is the country with world's freshwater lake, Lake Victoria, that gives rise to River Nile, that services the upstream countries. Kampala city sits around the Nile Basin and the Lake Victoria Basin. The sprawling occupancy of houses are equally eating up that land. We need to protect this freshwater lake, but also make sure that water is available for the rest of the world. You also know that Uganda comprises over 80% of the great water lakes. There are fishing communities that sit around these lakes and are also equally eating up and contaminating the waters. You also know that Uganda sits along the equator. The northern and southern hemisphere is spread along Uganda. Opportunity for tourism, opportunity for making sure this ecological system survives. But lastly, Uganda is the country that is green all through with the potential to be the food basket for Africa and the world. Now my question. How do we attract funding to create mass housing that will protect this land, save the flora and fauna for you and the generations to come and enjoy? We want to attract investors, financiers, long-term financing that is affordable, that can give us resilient housing.
Well, I hope you're not asking this question to me.
I'm just putting it to the whole world.
That's quite intimidating. Maybe a second question, but really a question, because we have really a short time and well, actually the session is off. So, well, I suggest that we take one more question and we give a global answer, because this is more a statement and this is more a question for what is to come. How do we collectively find answers to this question, of course, that are the question of Uganda, the question of Zambia, the question of Brazil, and maybe a little easier scale question of France and United States. I mean, of course, we have different questions here. Maybe you can take one question that would be a question, not statement, if possible.
I will say Uganda is definitely the most beautiful country in the world. I guess my question is coming from, I'm a Canadian. I'm highest emissions per capita of any G20 nation. And it has a lot to do, most of the conversation today has been about under-provision of housing. We are over-provided by housing. We're faced a housing crisis, yet we have got houses that are far, far too big for us. So it's an under-provision of housing, but an over-provision of square feet under a roof. And I think that this isn't a problem just of Canada. It's a problem of many countries. And a big part of how we're going to address our emissions is how we tackle the housing we've already built and look at it in a different way, and its infrastructure. And I think a question from my American colleague on the previous panel is like, this comes down to urban design and policy of not looking to build more housing, but what do we do with what we already have? Thank you.
Yeah, so this is, well, I'm sorry, we have another session afterwards, so we need to conclude here. Maybe we can conclude, well, I have only very politically incorrect answers to this question, so and I have, and I have politically incorrect answers to other questions. I just want to conclude here. Well, you need to say something. Okay,
No,
go ahead. You need it. Okay,
No,
so if you need it, go ahead.
My question is, what's next?
Exactly.
So this
Thank you
has
for this
been
question.
A fantastic session. We've had a
What's
fantastic
next?
day yesterday.
Okay.
What's next? And
Yeah,
how can
to
we
me,
find out
what's next is in the hand of your neighbor here on the front, and on the hand of your neighbors here. How can we go faster? How can we go further and faster on this question of sustainable and affordable housing? We have a decision. We have a resolution in UN Habitat. It's one of the resolutions that has been supported by many countries, including the United States. It's important to go further on that. So we really call for going further on that, going further on housing, not only with the UN Habitat, but also with the banking sector. I think, and this is going to conclude on a very politically incorrect say, this question has to be really taken into account by development banks at the appropriate scale, which has not really been the case to me until now, not only in terms of volume, but in terms of solutions, of inventing new solutions. So maybe we can go through, I know, maybe if you have 1 minute to answer each of these questions. You can't answer to this question in 1 minute. Nobody can. So, okay. So really, thank you for that. I'm really sorry for timekeeping. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Sorja. Yeah.
I
sorry.
think one of the crucial. Recently, we saw the launch of a new initiative at European level, the new European Bauhaus, and the key terms they use are beautiful, sustainable, together, and I think this notion of together is crucial to how we continue. The solution to housing is not an individual problem. If you are homeless, it's not your fault. If you can't access affordable housing, it's not your fault. It's a societal challenge, obviously a governmental challenge, and we all have to achieve it together. And I think in the last decades, housing has been left to the market, has been left to the individual, and it has been much too much open to speculative trends. So we have to bring it back to something we see: clever housing policy, financing that stays in the society, and rental housing is crucial there. Tenants' rights are crucial there. So we need this paradigm shift to start to see housing as a really important part of an infrastructure for a successful society, just like health and education. And I think once this becomes accepted in our conversations, then we start to find those clever solutions to reduce emissions, but also tackle the right to housing. That's my minute.
Well, that would be the ultimate, the last of our session. Thank you very much. Well, I think the conclusion is let's go further together. Thank you.